tuning in. Thank you so much for tuning in. What's up, everybody? What's up? Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. So, as many of y'all know, I usually don't do anything outside of Wednesday nights when it comes to Woke Wednesdays and the show. But every single Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have a different show. Last night was What Does It Mean to Be a Black Woman? And we had a panel of phenomenal, young, insightful, brilliant young black women. And they spoke about their various experiences, about being women, about being black, about their ethnicities as well. It was a phenomenal conversation. And one thing that I did last night was I said two things that I wanted to clarify. We ran out of time. So I guess real quick, my name is Herson Sanchez. I am a second-year doctoral student at Florida International University. My PhD is in higher education. My research focus is around race and racism. And I am the founder and host of Woke Wednesdays. So all the posts, they all see it all day. I'm the one who's always posting these posts. So thank you so much for tuning in tonight. So last night on the show, I made 2 points that I wasn't able to get to because we just ran out of time. 2 hours goes by real quick. And last night I said two things that I think were controversial. And I would love just to kind of clarify, get your insight. Feel free to critique what I'm saying. Let's talk about it. So I said the following things. I said that I think that the phrase black excellence is problematic. I also said that the term white privilege is also problematic. So these two phrases I find to be problematic, black excellence and white privilege. So I'd like to deconstruct this argument. I'd like to kind of go into it a little bit, and I would love just to have your feedback. Tell me what you think. If you think I'm crazy, if you think I'm wrong, please feel free to tell me and say why. What do you think? This is a space, I think, to learn, to grow, and to think through ideas. So the first one, black excellence. So black excellence has become a hashtag. I think it has become a form of empowerment within the black community. And I want to specifically draw parallels between the idea of black excellence and something that we say in the Hispanic community. One of the most popular Hispanic channels is Univision or Univision. This is one of the most popular channels. And please feel free to comment, ask questions about what I'm saying. Have any of y'all heard of Univision or Univision in Spanish? Univision is one of the most. Someone's sending me a request to be live in the video, so we can do that later. I wanna make these points first, and then we can get to that. So Univision is probably one of the most popular Spanish channels on television. And I remember when I was growing up, they had this phrase called Orgullo Hispano. Orgullo means to be proud or pride, and then Hispano means Hispanic. Hey, Caesar. So I want to draw parallels between black excellence and Orgullo Hispano. Jason's saying, yes, my grandma's favorite channel. Of course, I used to watch all the soap operas with my grandma, all the novelas, soñadoras, amigas y rivales. We can go into it. But yeah, when my grandma used to babysit, I used to watch them all. But so they had this thing where they would say, just saying yes. They had this thing where they would say Orgullo Hispano, and then they would kind of introduce to you a Hispanic person that was doing something that was, I guess, it was deemed as we're proud of this. We take a pride in this. And it's pretty much the same thing as black excellence. So I'd like to draw parallels between these two things. And why I think these two phrases or expressions are problematic are because we're deeming something as excellent, or we're saying, or in the in the case of the Hispanic channel, we're deeming something to be proud of, to have pride in. Oftentimes, today I did a hashtag search of black excellence, and I went through many of the posts that had the hashtag black excellence, and I found that most of these were somehow correlated to higher education. So people graduating from college. We also see this a lot. This hashtag is used a lot with celebrities, right? So there was a picture of a lot of black celebrities that went around in hashtag black excellence. So I kept on thinking about it, and that started bugging me. Same thing with Orgullo Hispano. It was always someone who was famous or someone doing something. It was never Afro-Latino or Afro-Latina, never. It was usually kind of like a lighter skin, probably someone who looked like me or lighter, Hispanic. and it was Orgullo Hispano. So even then, that was racialized, which is really interesting. But the bigger point is, as what do we deem as excellent when we say Black excellence or Orgullo Hispano? What are we deeming as something that we're proud of? So it's usually a celebrity. It's usually somehow tied to higher education in some way. And it started bugging me because I think all of us, many of us, do excellent things that aren't deemed as excellent oftentimes. So excellence ends up becoming a standard. There's requirements to be excellent. So if you go to college, now you are excellent. If you graduate from college, you are deemed as excellent. Or in the Hispanic community, if you graduate from college, now it's Orgullo Hispano. Now we have something to be proud of. And I thought, all I could think about was my mom, a woman who is a single mother, who her entire life has cleaned houses, done domestic work. As a child, she used to take me to clean office buildings with her. At like midnight, we'd be in there cleaning. I would help her take out the trash. I would help her clean bathrooms, scrub things as a child. And to me, I'm like, why is she not an example of Orgullo Hispano? Why is she not an example of the pride of Hispanic pride? Right? Same thing with so many other Black folks that I know who are phenomenal. You know, people who are putting their nickels and dimes together to send their children to college. Why aren't the parents deemed as Black excellence oftentimes? Their child is once they graduate, but the parents aren't. So I think that's part of my contention with Black excellence or Orgullo Hispano, that there are certain requirements that I guess we have to fulfill in order to be excellent, in order for us to be proud of something. As if everyday folks aren't excellent in their own type of way. As if everyday Hispanics, as if we don't have something to be proud of. Any person who is an immigrant who has the capability, the desire to cross a border, to cross a desert, right, to give their children a better life, that to me is Orgullo Hispano. That to me is Hispanic pride, right? And Black folks can also be immigrants. That to me is Black excellence, right? But why is it that we have to have requirements for Black excellence or for Orgullo Hispano? Why is it that we have to have these requirements? And that to me, I think, is what I find problematic with these terms. That if you are not this, then you cannot be considered Black excellence, or you cannot be Orgullo Hispano. Almi is one of my classmates, phenomenal, just extremely intelligent, insightful individual, and she's referring to something that we've read in class regarding the word excellent. And Almi, I was thinking about that too, and she's saying that the word excellent is non-referential, Mr. Koff, University in Ruins. So feel free to read, y'all, University in Ruins. It's a book where their argument is that excellence doesn't really mean anything if it's non-referential. It only becomes something when it is referential. Manic is saying, I think you may be putting too much thought into this. Everything is subjective and objective. Miss Curley saying what he said. I thought about that too, Manic. I was thinking about that. I'm like, am I thinking about this too much? Am I doing the most right now? And then I decided that I wasn't. The reason being is because look at every example of Black excellence. Look at every single example that is given of Black excellence. Same thing with Orgullo Hispano. Let's look at every single example that is deemed as worthy of being called Black excellence or something of pride in the Hispanic community. It's usually tied to higher education, to graduating, or to some type of celebrity status. Why? That's my contention with all of this. Why does it have to be that to be this? And I do think that language is powerful. I do think that there are implicit messages that we should definitely pay attention to. I do think that a lot of things should be analyzed. So what message are we saying when this is Black excellence or this is considered Orgullo Hispano and then this isn't? What message are we saying? And I think that's something to think about. And let's see, Menex is saying, academia gives you the license to draw and stretch arguments almost to the point of fruitfulness. And I think I can agree to a certain degree with that. I definitely see it all the time. But I also think that we should critique things, and I think we should think about things, because I do think there's a message that's being sent. So even with what I'm saying now, right? Y'all might see the hashtag, let's say tomorrow, and maybe it'll cause you to think a little and be like, oh, okay, I see what he's kind of saying. Imani is saying, I think you're actually bringing up a great point. in the idea of black excellence, but a lot of us do also acknowledge that black excellence is more than graduating from college or becoming rich. Absolutely. I think Imani is making a great point. But I do think that if that is the case, then why aren't these posts or the physicalities of the posts or the commercials a reflection of that conversation, Imani, right? Because I think I think you make a great point. Maddox saying basically don't get lost in the rabbit hole. Oh, I'm definitely not lost. I definitely know very much where I am. But I think you do make a fair point, Maddox. Kevin saying, I think the reason the word is used often is because images of black folks has always been negative stereotypes. So to see black folks making it the word is used for pride to knock down those negativities. And then Sashimi is saying, but who makes the list of what's excellent and what's not? I don't think there is one. And that's also, I think, the part of the point that I'm trying to make as well. I think Kevin makes a great point because black excellence, orgullo hispano, the same thing. So if y'all are just joining us, I'm tying orgullo hispano, which is something that is used on the Univision, Univision, the Hispanic channel, is the same thing as black excellence. It's kind of the same thing. So I'm critiquing both at the same time. I think this is a form of empowerment, it has ostensibly been used to empower, kind of what Kevin is saying. But part of what empowerment does, when we think about this critically, is that it has liberating aspects to it and it has dominating aspects to it. So yes, on the one hand, we are lifting people up, right? Through black excellence, the hashtag, right? The phrase, the expression. We're lifting certain black folks up. And that's part of my issue. We're putting certain folks at the focus of you are black excellence. Same thing with Orgullo Hispano. Certain folks are now the pride of Hispanics. It's not everybody. And it's never the single mother who's working 3 jobs to raise her children. That isn't the person at the forefront. When we think of the face of black excellence, and social media is extremely powerful, whether it's social media, whether it's on television, why does that not also have black excellence or orgullo hispano associated to it? Let's see. I want to be respectful of everyone's comments. Let me see. Kosher Williams is saying it's very materialistic sometimes because capitalism. That definitely has a role. Miss Curly's saying it's kind of just a popular term now though. Regular folk are mentioned because we're not famous. We kind of have to give it ourselves at this point, right? And that's kind of what I'm also saying. Of maybe retaking this word and also saying that we too are excellent. You don't have to be famous. You don't have to go to college to be excellent, to be amazing, to be phenomenal, to be a moral person. Same thing in the Hispanic community. You don't have to do all these things for us to take pride in ourselves. Let's see here. You're saying that from your viewpoint, though. I'm the one speaking. Ms. Curry saying, I get what you're saying, though. Savi saying, what standard for excellence should be set? You can't speak and see from every viewpoint. I'm not sure what you mean. What do we have to do? Personal growth, community service. I'm not even saying that we have to necessarily do anything. I think what we're already doing is beautiful as people, as trying to come together, as trying to learn and grow, loving one another. That I think that's a form of excellence, and I think that's something to take pride in, right? Remember, I'm using black excellence and orgullo hispano. I'm drawing parallels with both because I think we do the same thing in the Hispanic community through these avenues. So my point tonight is to make us think a little bit critically about this. That's what I'm saying. I don't want to just accept these phrases just because it's become a regular thing now. I'm not that type of person. And yeah, Menex is saying that the academy and being in school can do this. Absolutely, I wanted to do this. I think we should all be questioning things all the time. Be skeptical of everything. James Baldwin has a phenomenal quote where he talks about the purpose of education. And to him, the purpose of education is for people to question whether something is black or if it's white, if there's a God in heaven or if there's not. And he says that's the purpose of education, getting folks to question things. But James Baldwin also goes on to say that no one wants that type of person around. Because if we have that type of person around, then you're dangerous. We can't trust you. We don't want thinkers. Very interesting, in the late 1700s, Alexis de Tocqueville, Almi was in the class with me, this French man came to the United States to study Americans, all right, late 1700s. And what he noticed was that Americans wouldn't read, right, and they would only read, when they did read, it was like pop culture type stuff. So we can track this historically to over 300 years ago. And the same thing is now a phenomenal book called Anti-Intellectualism in America by Richard Hofstadter, where he talks about Americans are scared of the intellect. They're scared to question things. And that's what I'm trying to do tonight with these phrases of Black excellence and Orgullo Hispano. All I'm trying to do is critique them, question them, and not accept it. Because I think all of us, many of us, are excellent in our own right. My mother, right, who I'm saying who was a domestic worker still is, right? That to me is excellent because she was able to put her kids through school. She raised 3 kids. That is, to me, Orgullo Hispano. But we wouldn't deem her as such because she's not a celebrity, because she's not rich, because she doesn't look the part, because she can't speak English. So my point is, let's take these phrases back, these expressions back, and use them to maybe empower us even more. So let me read some of these comments. Let's see. Coach Orlando saying personal growth, community service, and mine is saying it definitely pushes down the marginalized people. Though I agree with you on that. I think being any kind of regular Black person is excellent. Thank you. Absolutely, Money. Jay's saying, I think Black, Hispanic, or other minorities, mothers, parents, families value the idea of, I want you to do better than what I did. So whatever that entails of it is excellent. You can't read others' thoughts. And sometimes in doing better, we undervalue where we came from. Ooh, that's a great point, Jay says. So I agree with you on your point. Some people believe excellence takes place at all levels. Very valid. If we go to say a very valid point. I hadn't looked at it like that before. Thanks for bringing this up. Certainly, food for thought. We should think more about how we can define excellence, success. Sabi saying, it's just being alive in our given circumstance is all we have to do. Then how is excellent? Reminds me of the whole participation trophy combo. And so again, remember my point. All I'm trying to do, I'm not saying let's not use these words as excellent. I'm not saying let's. All I'm saying is let's think about this a little critically, and let's also think about who we marginalize when we use such expressions. And what are the consequences to using such expressions? What are the hidden messages behind such expressions? Because again, empowerment, the idea of empowerment, part of this idea is that it can be liberating, right? So it can lift us up, but it can also be dominating. Dominating for whom, right? So in this case, people who are already marginalized oftentimes. So that's my point with Black excellence and Orgullo Hispano. And that's why I think these terms can be problematic. So let's see. Sabi's saying, I feel like generation of political power is tied to it because it's our way to recovery. Coach Orlando saying, it's classist to think success is synonymous with money and power. Coach Orlando, absolutely. Maddox saying, I understand what you're saying, but I don't think excellence is being withheld or held at certain levels or spaces. And you're entitled to your opinion. All I'm saying is that let's look at where these hashtags are being placed, which posts they're going on, and who is being attributed with Black excellence and with Orgullo Hispano. That's my point. Right? Let's see how this plays out in the media. And yeah, so again, you don't have to believe what I'm saying. You could say, Hurston, what you're saying is you're problematic. Hurston, you're crazy. I'll say, cool. But this is me trying to think through these phrases. Again, I don't just accept these things. I'm trying to think about it a little bit more. So the phrase number 2 that I found to be problematic, and I said last night, was the term white privilege. So I'm sure y'all are probably going to jump me on this one. And it's also funny, like, I've gone live before by myself on Woke Wednesdays, and people are like, what? You're not Black? Everyone, I guess for some reason, I've been getting this message a lot from people DMing. They're like, Hurston, I thought you were Black. I'm like, no, I'm actually not. Someone actually said, whoa, you're white. I'm like, well, not white either. So let's talk about white privilege, because I think this is a problematic phrase. Again, I'm trying to think through these terms and to be critical. Medica said, have you slept all day? Did I sleep all day? I've never been able to sleep for 24 hours straight. So I didn't sleep all day. But I did sleep today. It's kind of late and it's dark outside. Well, I don't know there's light in here. So white privilege. So real quick, some background. My family's from Nicaragua. When people ask me how I identify racially, I say mestizo. Mestizo usually means someone who comes from predominantly indigenous blood, but also has some Spaniard in them, right? And maybe even some African in them. So for a fact, I know that I definitely have Spanish in me through colonization, right? So my family comes from indigenous blood in Nicaragua, Central America. And so there's Spanish in there, and I recently found out that my great-great-grandmother, some of my cousins are Black, so they come from African ancestry. So like many Hispanic people, we are very much miscegenated. That means we're very much mixed with different types of, I guess, of people due to colonization, right? So I identify, if I have to identify racially, I identify as mestizo. So the term white privilege, I've been thinking about this a lot for a while now. There was a very famous article that was called, and I can send it out. It was written by Peggy McIntosh, a scholar. She wrote about white privilege, and then Kathy's saying this woke Thursday. So tonight I'm clarifying some points that I did not clarify last night because we ran out of time. And I'll be posting this on YouTube as well. This will post on the IG story for 24 hours. So white privilege, let me talk about this. White privilege is usually defined as a series of assets, right, that white folks have, right? So some examples, can y'all give me some examples of white privilege? The man is compelled and on a roll, Kathy. So can y'all give me some examples of white privilege? So I'll give you some examples too. So let's say so a white man walks into a store and not being followed because they think he's going to steal something, right? As opposed to a person of color. And in these articles, they usually refer to black folks, right? A black person walks into a store and they're going to be followed, right? Just by virtue of being black. So the privilege is that that white folks can walk in and not be followed in the store. I don't know if that makes sense. Let me see. Another example of white privilege would be, let's see. Y'all help me out. What's another example of white privilege? Kathy's saying, listen, I'm not complaining. I would take woke every day. Savi's saying benefit of the doubt in the public eye. Yes, that's a great way of saying it. Textbook white privilege. Yeah, I'm trying to think of real life examples of white privilege. Another one, you know what? I have the article on my computer. If y'all give me 1 second, I'll pull it up right now. Bam. Let's see here. Because I want to be accurate with what I'm saying. Let's see here. Y'all just give me 1 second. Alright, cool. Alright, I have the article. Let's see. Y'all give me some good... Alright, Miss Curly said, white people during a storm take groceries to survive. Okay. Carla saying, not being convicted for crimes as frequently. Yeah, Miss Curly saying, black people do it and it's stealing. Carla saying, getting more job interviews. Yeah, perfect. So I have the article here. This, mind you, this was a very, very, very famous article that came out. It was called White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. I can definitely email it to whoever would like it. I've put it on the show before, and I have emailed it to a lot of people. So if anyone would like to read it, this was probably one of the foundational texts. A lot of the language that we get, right? White privilege. These type of terms, we get this from the academy, right? We get this from universities, and they end up kind of disseminating throughout the public. So this article was a foundational article when it came to white privilege. This was written by a white woman. She's a scholar. Her name was Peggy McIntosh. This article is very common. People usually read this when it comes to white privilege. Kosher Woodland saying, more empathy on trial. Yes. Savi saying, as I've done nothing wrong, so the cops can't harm me. Lighter sentences for crime. Absolutely. So this scholar gives 50 examples of white privilage. She legit lists them. I don't know if you can see this. She lists 50 examples of white privilege. So she, example number 19. I can speak in public to a powerful male group without putting my race on trial. Example 20. I can do well in challenging a situation without being called a credit to my race. Example 24. I can be pretty sure that if I ask to talk to the person in charge, I'll be facing a person of my race. So she goes on to give all these examples. Again, I'm more than happy to email this article out to anybody that would like it. So, and to read her definition of white privilege, she says, I have come to see white privilege as an invisible package of unearned assets that I can count on cashing in each day, but about which I was meant to remain oblivious. Right? So this is her definition of white privilege. I think oftentimes within POCs, right? POCs, people of color, within our circles, when we talk about things, we throw this term around, white privilege. So that's my number one contention, and I will clarify that. But number two, I don't like the word privilege. Privilege means unearned assets, something that you just get by virtue of being something. So by virtue of being white, right, racially white, you can have these privileges. So this is my biggest issue with this phrase. So I have two basic issues with this phrase. First one is I don't like the word privilege. I think we should stop saying white privilege. Part of me, and I'm still trying to think through this, and I would love y'all's feedback. Part of me thinks that we should start saying white power instead of white privilege. Again, the word privilege is defined as unearned assets. A series of, unearned assets. She calls it a knapsack of unearned assets. And my problem with this definition is that it dismisses historical context, and it also dismisses systemic issues. This idea of privilege, right? The idea that white people can cash in something, right? The only reason this exists, part of the only reason that it exists, is because of hundreds of years, right? So it started with colonization, right? And then it went through constructing race. So let's construct whiteness. Let's construct blackness. Let's construct Native Americans. People who are first peoples of this land didn't refer to themselves as Native Americans. No, that's an invention, right? They had tribes. They identified with each other's tribes. Even Aztec, Seminole, this isn't what they called themselves, right? These are terms that we came up with, and by we I mean like white Americans that colonized, right? So through these hundreds of years, the privilege of whiteness has been constructed. So when we say privilege, it dismisses that entire history, because all we're defining it as now is a series of unearned assets. The only way you can have these unearned, and this is my issue, unearned assets, I think they were very much earned in a diabolical type of way. Genocide, the raping and pillaging of our women, of our people, killing of our children, right? Massacres. That's a type of diabolical earning in my perspective. And I think that is not a privilege. That is a power. That is a power. And I think when we say white privilege, we're dismissing hundreds of years of colonization, right? A country built on the backs of slaves. We're dismissing all that, and we're just calling it a privilege, right? So the fact that you can go into a store and you won't be followed around is a privilege? No, that is a byproduct or a consequence of colonization and of giving whiteness power for hundreds of years. So it's not a privilege. To me, it's a white power. It is a power. Privilege to me isn't strong enough of a word. Sometimes we tend to make our language a little softer so folks don't get offended. And I get that, because sometimes you have to know your audience. But if we're going to call shit what it really is, this is a power. And the only way you can have this type of power is through a historical legacy of violence and killing and power building on top of each other, right? So to me, that's one of the biggest reasons I dislike this term white privilege. Because I think it's too simple. I think it dismisses a history. And the United States especially has this historical amnesia. They love to forget things. They love emancipation, right? Emancipation of slavery in this country wasn't that long ago. Like a little over 200 years ago. And I'm speaking in a very simplistic way right now. No, like this is a very serious issue, I think. So let me read some of these comments real quick. Let's see. Let's see. White privilege to me is actually the lack of certain deficiencies that are held by other groups. White power reinforces the platform of the KKK, so I wouldn't use that term because then the meaning really gets lost. That's interesting. And I get what you're saying, and I thought about that too, about white power being associated to the KKK, and I think that's the type of power they were talking about was a violent power. It wasn't a systematic power. So when the KKK would say things like white power, they were really getting at a violence, right? They were saying that whiteness is powerful, right? And then they would enact violence on folks, right? And I get that, but I think power isn't analyzed in a critically enough, oftentimes in the way we kind of use it in our everyday language. And I get it. Not everyone's trying to be woke and talk all this stuff all the time. I get it. But I do think this is a type of power that is associated to whiteness. The very fact that you can walk into a store and not be chased around, that is a type of power. And the only way you get that type of power is through this horrible legacy in history. Let's see, Savvy saying, feeling no duty to be woke because you belong to a power-dominant cohort, white privilege. Manic is saying, I didn't see where you were going with this until you got there. Argue the term white power already has its own meaning. So maybe y'all are right. So maybe let's think about something, right? But I think the point still stands, right? I don't think privilege is a strong enough word. So maybe white power doesn't work here. So maybe we have to think about something else that might be more appropriate. So I think that's a great point that y'all are bringing up. Jason's saying, you don't earn genocide or colonization by cheating. If I cheat in a fight, it isn't earned. I took it, and to me, power is too positive and gives them too much credit, in my opinion. Interesting. I hope that made sense. I think I kind of get it, Jasa. I'm not sure. But when we talk about power, especially in the conversations around oppression, usually the word power is associated to this, right? So certain folks can't exercise discrimination because they don't have that type of political power, right? So that power word is often thrown around. So maybe we need another word. I'm not sure. And maybe if privilege, when we use that word privilege, maybe if it did intend and address this horrible historical legacy, then maybe we could stick with that word. But I don't think it does it. I think it reduces it to an interpersonal thing. All right? So, and that's, yeah, so I think the word privilege just reduces the power of whiteness to just, oh, you're not going to chase me around the store. No, whiteness is so much more powerful than that. Sabi's saying, the oversimplicity is the problem I had with the men are trash comment this morning. So that's another thing, and we can talk about that. But I just kind of want to finish this. Miss Curley saying white right, perhaps instead of power, white right. That could, that's interesting. Or maybe white history, whiteness. I think there's something called Caucasoid pass. Y'all are silly. That pissed them off even more. So I think, like I said, there's something to think about. But I do think we should reject the term white privilege. I don't think that is a strong enough word. Yeah, for everything that I just said. Now, part two of the reason why I don't like this term white privilege. Especially, and this comes down, I think, for especially POCs, people of color. We throw this word around very, very easily sometimes within our circles. And y'all can say I'm lying, but I'm not. I'll use myself as an example. I critique myself all the time. Donald Trump. When Donald Trump was elected into office, I said oftentimes to a lot of folks, I'm like, he is the perfect example of white privilege. I used to say that. And I also said, who's the guy from Stanford, the swimmer who raped a young woman behind the dumpster? Y'all help me with his name. I forgot his name. Piece of shit person. I forgot. But people were saying this is the perfect example of white privilege. Right? The way he was just able to... He wasn't... Brock. Yeah, Brock. That Brock Turner. Yes, thank you, y'all. Thanks. And he was quickly absolved from all these court cases, right? They're like, oh, this is the perfect example of white privilege. I'm like, is it? So let's think about this a little bit more critically. And I get what people are saying, but let's think about this a little bit more critically. There's a swimmer at Stanford, right? So already one of the top universities in the country. Person has money, right? And I think white privilege or white power, whatever we're calling it, is part of it. But when we say white privilege or white power, it only gets at a racial identity, right? White. That's what we're saying. It only gets at a racial identity. It does not talk about class. It does not talk about sexual orientation. It does not talk about gender expression. It does not talk about able bodies or differently abled bodies. It doesn't. White is only getting at a racial expression. It's called white privilege, white power, whatever we're calling it. That's all it's getting at. Life is more complicated than just race. There's more to life than just race. And class is a huge factor. A poor white person right, who is differently abled in a wheelchair, right, do they have the same amount of power, right, as Oprah Winfrey? Maybe in some contexts, maybe not. But I don't like getting into conversations about comparative suffering, because I think that's a stupid argument that takes us nowhere. Well, I have it worse than you. You have it, like someone all that is a very dangerous argument. So I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that white privilege or white power only addresses race. It dismisses class. It dismisses gender. It dismisses sexual orientation. It dismisses everything else, right? And life is more complicated than that. And we oftentimes just throw this term around. And I'm like, no. To me, life isn't that simple. I'm from North Carolina. I'm in North Carolina right now. I'm in the rural part of North Carolina. We see a lot of poor white folk, right? Living in horrible conditions. Rural parts of the country, horrible. How do you explain to them white privilege, right? And so maybe this term is even sometimes maybe limiting us from more powerful political movements, when a person who is so poor, right, who is differently able, how are you even supposed to begin to understand this, right? So I think this phrase is interesting. I get what we're saying. I get it. I get it. But I think it can be problematic, and I think we should analyze it and deconstruct it and critically assess it. So to me, so for those two reasons: number one, that it dismisses historical legacies of violence and oppression, and because sometimes we just throw it around too loosely, and I don't think we should do that. Let me read some of the comments. Sabi's saying redneck populations don't enjoy the same potency of privilege. Ms. Curry saying cis white rich men are an entirely different monster, unfortunately. So I see your point. Ms. AKA, hey, Ms. AKA, she's saying the term affluenza, class status relation used as a defense against crimes. I'm not sure what that means. Sabi's saying Oprah is less safe around the police than they are, is how I'd explain it. Yeah, perhaps. But so I don't know. I don't know if I can make that claim, right? She's a billionaire, right? Or almost a billionaire. But Sabi, you might be right. In some situations, yeah. In some situations, maybe not. This is not a personal thing. So I'm not trying to just say, well, this person can do it, so everybody else. That's like saying, oh, Obama was president, racism is over. No. I'm talking about systematic things, systematic issues, right? So I think this is something to think about. I think let me see real quick. Kevin is saying, but I think poor white boy wouldn't be stopped by the police than a black boy. So we don't know this. Yes, white males statistically. Y'all check out Tim Wise. If y'all don't know Tim Wise, phenomenal white guy, brilliant. I mean, he's the truth. Check him out on YouTube. He gave the statistic that black and brown males, black and Hispanic males, are 60% more likely to get pulled over than a white male, when white males are 66% more likely to have drugs on them than black or brown males. So Kevin, you might be right. That's not my point. My point is that how do we explain white privilege, right? As problematic as the term as that is, to someone who's so poor? How do we do that? So they might have a racial privilege, but what about their class privilege or lack thereof? And in this country, in the United States, everything is very hyper-racial. We understand race very well. We don't understand class very well. We tend to reduce class oftentimes to just pure economics. It just means money. There's low class, middle class, and high class. Class is a lot more complicated than that. There's a culture to it. The economics is very much tied to it. For example, Donald Trump, right? Millionaire. Maybe that's a type of class, high class, whatever. But then he also goes to McDonald's, right? That could be considered low class. I'm not trying to get into that. I'm just saying that class is a lot more complicated than we often understand it, especially in the United States. I've been learning about this more and more. I have some great articles. I'm all about sharing articles. I don't think we should be keeping this information to ourselves. So if y'all want this, please just DM me your email. I'll be more than happy to send it to you. So that's my point. White privilege only gets at a racial type of category. It does not address anything else, right? White women are also marginalized. Yes, they might have more power in certain instances than black males. I get it. But again, my point is that white privilege only gets at a racial category. There's more to life than just race. Let's see. Poor whites are pondered to be more blacks. They'd have to know she was the Oprah. Yes, but yeah, you get my point. She's talking about that rich white kid that got away with murder, and they said because he was too affluent to be punished. Let's see. Yeah, sorry. Dr. TJ3, frat brother. Just because they're poor does not mean that it's systematically easier for poor white to pull themselves out of the gutter. That does not mean that it's systemically easier for poor white people to pull themselves out of the gutter. So I'm not sure. And to be clear, poverty is also a systemic issue, right? Poverty is a systemic issue. Many people think that just by going to college you can get out of poverty. It doesn't quite work like that. It can't work like that. We live in a capitalist society. It cannot work like that. It's a lot more complicated. And part of my point tonight is, it's kind of the point oftentimes on Woke Wednesdays, that these topics are a lot more complicated than we often make them out to be. I think part of being an American or living in an American society is simplifying extremely complicated things. Savi's saying, once you begin the white privilege discussion, you're talking about race stuff. So it's inherently a racial topic. Yes, that's part of my point. That it becomes only about race. That's part of my point, and we end up dismissing everything else. Other social issues, social categories, like gender, sexual orientation, class, absolutely, completely. That's part of my point. Ms. Curry saying, because to be honest, when I talk about rich white men, I also then say privilege. You can say there's more to life than race, like I specified to them in the convo. That's the topic. Yes, I think I'm agreeing. I think we're kind of making the similar point. In other words, I believe the poor black man will find it more difficult to get out of a job than a poor white man. I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that. I don't know if y'all are getting my point. Maybe I didn't make it clear enough, and that's my fault. 2 reasons why I don't like the term white privilege. The first reason was due to colonization. I think white privilege is a cop-out. I think it's too simple of a word. I think this is historically rooted in colonization and genocide of people, which is what gives whiteness power and privilege in the first place, right? So I think this phrase white privilege is horrible. And the second part is that we throw it around too much as an answer to everything. Oh, well, it's white privilege. Oh, clearly that's white privilege. Oh, that's white privilege. No, I don't think it always works that way. I don't think things are always just reducible to just race, which is part of my point. I think there are also other overlaps. Again, this is something I'm still thinking through, which is why I love that y'all are challenging what I'm saying and giving me feedback, because I think this is part of us learning and growing together, something that I love to do on Woke Wednesdays. And these are the 2 things I wanted to clarify from last night. I don't know if y'all tuned in last night. It was an amazing episode. We talked about what does it mean to be a black woman. We had 4 phenomenal panelists, brilliant, just insightful, beautiful people. And I said these 2 things. I said that I find black excellence to be a problematic phrase, and I find white privilege to be problematic. So I discussed all that tonight. Let's see. LOL, you can't talk about citrus fruit and say, oh, but what about apples? Dr. T said, I agree with white privilege does not confront the root of the problem. If we were talking about general privilege, then at what point does class status come down to the personal grind? Very interesting. I'm not sure, but I do think white privilege it becomes extremely reductionist to things, because I think things are a lot more complicated. That can't be our answer to a lot of things. Oh, well, it's white privilege. Is it? They're also extremely rich, so it's not just white privilege, right? So I'm just saying things are more complicated than just white privilege. And again, this is I'm not giving answers to life. I'm just asking us, or at least posing, that we think about this in a more critical way. That's all I'm kind of saying. Dr. TJ3 is saying very interesting. Ms. Cursing, your point is clear though, by the way. Thank you. This is tough. This is tough to talk about. This stuff I'm still thinking about, still thinking through. So I appreciate y'all just kind of joining in tonight. I know it's not Wednesday. Savi's saying, because truthfully, if rich whites sit around and do nothing, then they will eventually become poor whites. So that's not necessarily true, right? Research-wise, we know that the rich will most likely stay rich in their lives. The poor will most likely stay poor for the rest of their lives. But it's the middle class that tends to kind of fluctuate up and down. Again, I have great articles if y'all want to read them about all this stuff. Trying to think. All right, cool. That's all I had to say tonight. I hope that made somewhat of sense. I hope that maybe it challenged us to think a little bit more and differently. I know y'all challenged me a lot tonight. So maybe white power is not the right word. Maybe it could be something else. So, Savi, you're just now. You lose me now, dog. But yeah, if y'all have any more questions, please feel free to DM me. So, Dr. TJ3, appreciate you, brother. Ms. Curtis saying, if you end up ever writing about this and get published and stuff for changing the term, feel free to use white right. I appreciate it. She said, give me credit, though. Ms. Curtis, I've been trying to get you on the show to be a panelist and a guest for a while. So, I'm mad at you. We ain't talking until then. But yeah, if y'all have any questions, please feel free to let me know. If you disagree, you think I'm crazy, let me know. More than happy to have this conversation. Next week's topic is Donald Trump, actually. So we'll be talking about white power, white privilege, or white right, or whatever we're talking about. Whatever we're calling it. And we'll be talking about why he's actually not that different of a president from every other president that we've had. There are some differences, but we're going to challenge all that. We have a phenomenal, brilliant guest. So y'all feel free. So I was saying that was an apology. Dog, you be posting a lot of comments, so I can't read everything. But ain't no need to apologize, man. We're all thinking and talking through this, which is a beautiful thing. I wish we would do this more often. So yeah. So y'all feel free to tune in next week. Woke Wednesdays, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, every single Wednesday. Hope to talk to y'all then. Hope to see you then. If y'all have any questions about any of the articles that you would like, please feel free to send me your email. I'm more than happy to share this information with y'all. All right, y'all. Take care. Peace and blessings. Good night.